All right, welcome to the Money Puzzle. I am Brian Ramsey, and this is Chris Vaughn. Today, we're going to be talking about the biggest expense you're going to have throughout your lifetime. And I'll bet you spend hardly any time during the year talking about it, discussing, planning for it. And I'll bet you spend virtually no time discussing or planning for it in the future. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, Chris, why don't you tell the folks who we are and where we're located?
Well, we're Family Wealth Planning Partners. We're located at the intersection of Shelbyville Road and Hurstbourne Lane, right behind the P.F. Chang's, very easy to find. We're a full-service financial planning firm, so basically that's where the whole money puzzle comes from, is we figure out how to put all the pieces of your money puzzle together in the way they fit the best.
Exactly. All right, so Chris, I posed a question at the beginning of the show.
Yep.
Not really a question, more of a statement, right? What are we talking about? What is the biggest expense folks are going to have throughout their lifetime? What do we?
During their retirement years, by far the most expensive thing that they've got is taxes.
Really, throughout their lifetime.
Throughout their lifetime, that's true too.
Right.
Yeah. People think that during retirement, the big expense is going to be medical expenses.
That's right.
You know, the insurance and all the long-term care type things, all that stuff. But taxes far, far outweigh that. In fact, we were looking this up, and we said that we found that the average person pays $480,000 in taxes over their lifetime. So $500,000. That's a pretty significant amount of money, and people just, they don't plan for it at all.
All right, so here's a question.
Yeah.
We have lots of folks that come in, either have heard our podcast or they come in from the TV show, and we ask that question, right? We talk about taxes, right? It's one of our main pieces to our puzzle.
Yep.
And we ask that question, how much time do you spend talking, planning, discussing taxes for your, how much, what do we think? I mean, we get lots of answers, but what do we think? How much time do people spend per year?
Including the amount of time where they're stuffing receipts into a shoebox to take to their accountant, maybe 30 minutes a year, maybe. It's just not that much. And, you know, those of us who actually understand the whole tax planning thing, we put a whole lot more effort into it, and you do it throughout the year. But most people just don't put that much into it. They want to put this one off. They don't want to think about it. It's painful. So, you know what? When February or March gets here, I'll put some stuff together real quick, and I'll take it over to my tax guy. And that's all they do.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so here's another question. We said they spend virtually little time talking about current taxes,
right,
and almost no time moving forward. So wouldn't you say that's about what we experience is, you know, folks that come in and we talk about, what are you doing from a tax, but what are you planning? How much time do you spend planning in the future? And we get one answer.
You usually get this look like, what do you mean plan? I put my stuff together and I take it to my accountant. Isn't that tax planning? Isn't that what I'm supposed to do? And that's what we usually get from people.
It is. It's unbelievable. All right, so here's another, I'm going to pose this to you. So you and Kathy, a couple of years ago, it's kind of pre-COVID, right? You and Kathy had a significant anniversary date. We won't tell which one, but you had a significant anniversary date, right?
Yes, we did.
You're planning a very nice trip. How much time do you think you spent putting that trip together?
Oh my gosh, 50, 60 hours. I mean, we worked on that for a year and a half.
Right.
We went with some other people. So we had multiple events where we all got together and kind of said, okay, how are we going to do this part? And what do we want to see when we go here? Then, of course, you know, there's all the different places that you want to go. It's, okay, so what kind of money do we want to spend at that spot? And how much time do we want to spend at this one? So, yeah, we put in a lot of time.
Yeah, and I'll give this example. So several years ago, I bought a house, right? I moved out to Oldham County. We wanted to send our kids to Oldham County, so I moved out there. When I did, I spent, I don't know, I'd say 10 to 15 hours. I was trying to figure out exactly how much but it's about 10 to 15 hours just doing preliminary search online.
Yeah.
Right? Then I actually met with a realtor, and we spent another, I don't know, 10 hours or so going around looking at a couple of houses. Actually, I just looked at a few. So most people spend a lot more time than I did. But still, all in all, it's about 20 hours, let's say, 20, 25 hours. And it's a significant asset, right? It's a $300,000 asset that I was purchasing. And I spent a lot of time talking about it and discussing it and reviewing and doing my due diligence. And yet here we are talking about the biggest expense folks are going to have throughout their lifetime. and they spend no time talking about it.
Right.
So you can't have your puzzle put together. You can't have a good financial plan if you're not talking about the biggest expense you're going to have throughout your lifetime, right? And so you've got to make sure that you plan for that.
Well, I think one reason that people spend so little time on it, like I was saying a minute ago, first of all, nobody wants to do their taxes. Everybody hates taxes, right? So you kind of procrastinate it. You don't want to spend a little time or too much time on it. You want to get it over with. But the other part of the problem is that they're typically only focused on the taxes this year. They're only focused on, how do I get the biggest refund or pay the least amount of money this year instead of looking at it over a lifetime? How do you get that $480,000 number lower? Because that's really the big picture that you have to look at there.
Yeah, so here's an interesting story. So Diane came from us she was a caller from a TV show. She came in and it was really interesting. She had a great story. So she had about $800,000 and about $700,000 of that was in her IRA, right? So we know what that means, right? Yep. When you take a distribution, you're going to pay tax on that. So she had just retired, or she was in the process of retiring, and she wanted us to do some cash flow planning for her. So we did. And we showed her the reports that said, here's the distribution you're going to have every month or every year. And she needed, I think it was $5,000 a month.
Something like that, yeah.
And she was delaying her Social Security benefits, so she needed the distributions out of her IRA to cover her full distribution, right? And so what happened was we showed her what the total distribution was, right? And it was about $6,500 total distribution in order to get the $5,000. And she was like, wait a minute, I don't want to take that much out. And I was like, sorry, because she never planned for the difference that you have to take out to account for taxes. She just didn't do that. And so she was very shocked. And so we wound up putting it in place, putting a good plan for her in place. And we worked on, where her Social Security was going to play in and when she was going to turn that on. And, she had some other income sources. But she was just blown away at how much extra she had to take out in order to get the net that she needed. Right. And so that's one of the biggest issues we find is that, when you're going through life and you're putting money into an account and you're saving 401k, IRAs, whatever, you don't think about the tax consequences down the road. And that's really where we step in to say, all right, that's fine, you're doing that, but let's also take a look at the tax consequences down the road because that plays a huge role. And we just said that it's the biggest expense you're going to have throughout your lifetime, and you need to be planning for it. So let's do this, Chris. So let's take a quick break.
All right.
Okay. And let's come back because I want to share a story about, you've got a story after this, right? So you got a story pretty interesting. It's a great story about a couple. So why don't you do this? Why don't you take us to break? And when we come back, we're going to talk about Chris's client on the other side.
Absolutely. So if you're concerned that you don't have what we call tax diversification, people mostly understand diversification of investments, but there's a tax diversification too. If you're concerned that you don't have that type of diversification, if all of these things are in one place, you've been saving well, but it's just not broken up correctly, give us a call at 844-900-5210. Talk to you a little bit, have you come in and talk to us, and we'll work through exactly how you need to go about dealing with that and getting the IRS as uninvolved in your future as is possible.
How confident are you in your current financial plan? Do you know with certainty how the recent market volatility will affect your future hopes and dreams? How much are you paying in taxes? And how much are you losing to unnecessary high fees? You didn't work to save this money so that you could spend your time worried in retirement. Now is the time to take charge of your finances so you can feel confident about your future. Call in during the next 30 minutes of today's show only to set up an absolutely complimentary, no obligation, full-blown financial review that will result in your own customized written plan. This is a $999 value that we're giving away complimentary to the first 10 people who respond. We'll start with a full-blown analysis of what you already have by running a report to untangle how much you are currently paying in fees, how you're allocated for risk, and what it's costing to work with your current advisor. Next, we'll identify your goals. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Where do you want to go, and who do you hope to go there with? Is your current financial plan set up to get you there without mishap? Let's design a roadmap to create a financial plan you can follow with confidence. Get the piece that so many people are missing from their retirement. Find out how having a written plan can make a difference to your retirement dreams. Call now to schedule your complimentary, no-obligation, full-blown financial review today.
All right, welcome back to the Money Puzzle. I am Brian Ramsey. That is Chris Vaughn. We are Family Wealth Planning Partners located right here in Louisville, Kentucky, and our phone number is 844-900-5210. Almost had a little memory lapse there, and I'm not old enough to have that big of an issue anymore, so hopefully. All right, Chris, we're talking about taxes, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about how folks don't plan enough for taxes.
Right.
That's one of those things that we see all too often as part of their puzzle that they ignore or don't spend enough time on. That's critically important because it can absolutely train wreck a retirement, right? And so that's what we want to make sure that we plan on. Before the break, we were talking about your clients. So go ahead and tell that story because it's a really interesting story.
It is. So this couple, Scott and Sheila, came to me several years ago. And what had happened was both of them had pensions. She worked for a government agency. He worked privately, but they both had nice pensions. And between the pensions themselves, they had a decent income. But what they had done for years and years and years is they had saved. You know, they plugged away money in their 401ks every single month, no matter what. And, you know, the money built up to some fairly significant amounts. And the first thing that I looked at when I saw this was, it was about 1.7 million at the time, by the way. They're not going to need most of this money. And I said, guys, you'll have a tax bomb. They said, what do you mean we got a tax bomb? Well, everything that they've got is subject to full taxation, right? So their pensions, their Social Security, all of that is going to be taxed as income, right? But then also they've got all this money saved up. When that money, when they turn 72, they have to start taking money out. That's the infamous RMD that we talk about all the time. When they start taking that money out, it's going to be huge, huge chunks. Okay, we're talking 6 figures worth of taxes that they're going to have to pay out of these accounts year in and year out. And I said, we have to do something to diversify these taxes. So what we did in this particular case, you know, a lot of people say, well, I want to take Social Security early. We intentionally pushed off Social Security in this case, not to maximize it. It does that. But in this case, it was to not have that income. And then we intentionally are spending down all the money that's in those 401ks a little bit more rapidly than what we normally would. So they're still paying taxes on it, but they're paying it out over a much larger period of time. And we know what the current tax law is. What we have now is going to sunset beginning of 2026. So we know we're in a lower tax bracket now than what we're going to be in the future. So let's go ahead and pull that money out, spend it, use it, enjoy it. And you still have a major tax problem, but we can at least spread it out where it's not quite as painful.
Right. Yeah, and so we had, I'll give you another example. We had Missy and, or Michelle and David, we call her Missy. Michelle and David, I'll be proper. So Michelle and David came in. Had been watching our podcast. We had mentioned on our podcast, we're now doing a TV show. They're going to start to watch the show. And after several weeks, they called and said, hey, we'd like to come in and meet with you. Their biggest issue was taxes, right? They want to know, hey, I don't even know I've not done any tax planning. You guys keep talking about taxes. It's part of this puzzle. And I want to know what the puzzle, all that stuff looks like. So we met with them. And the interesting thing was, when we first met with them, they had some tax complications, right? I mean, they were a little, you know, he had a business on the side and there were some complications there. So one of the very first things we did during the planning process was we invited their CPA over. And the CPA was like, well, wait a minute. This is very unusual. I typically don't go to meetings with advisors. Well, that's where we're different because we specifically have a meeting at the end of every year where we do tax planning. And that is a meeting specifically where we will have other tax advisors come in to meet with them. So we did. We had that their CPA come in, and we sat down and we had a great meeting, and we talked about different strategies they could put in place to save them taxes not only this year, but down the road. And in fact, there was a couple of, I would say, lighter conversations with the CPA because their main goal, right, is to save taxes for last year. That's really what that's what they're hired
job,
for.
Right.
But at the same time, our job is to also not only look at last year, but our job is to look 2, 3, 5, 20 years down the road, right? Mm-hmm. And so we had some fruitful conversation, and we came up with a great strategy for them. And now they're in a great place from a tax standpoint, right?
Right.
But that's a good example, and so is your clients, to show, well, they're our clients, but we're your lead on it.
Right.
But it's a great example to say that doing proper tax planning can go a long way, right?
Yes,
and it makes clients know, yes, I might pay some taxes here, but I understand what is happening down the road. I understand what that long-term result's going to be. Yes, I might pay a little bit more taxes now, but I also understand the benefit to me down the road.
So I had another client that we've been working with, Bob and Martha, you know who I'm talking about. It was that type of meeting. We did this last year where we had the accountant was there, and they were also working on the estate plan as well. So I was having a meeting with the CPA and with their estate attorney, and we were kind of brainstorming the best way to take care of this client. And in the meetings that they had with the estate attorney, they came up, they wanted to leave behind a couple $100,000 at the end of their life. They wanted that to go to some charities. And the CPA and I immediately said, why would we set that money aside? And what we did was we used a neat little tool called a donor advised fund. So we took $100,000 of their money, and this is a couple that's got a couple $1 million. We just took $100,000, we pulled it out of their IRA, reported it as income last year, but immediately put it in that fund, which is completely tax deductible. So it basically washed that out, and they're never going to have to pay money on that. Now it's invested, and it's growing, but at the end of their lives, any amount of money that's left in there will automatically be given to charity that they designated. And if they have something that comes up during their lifetime that they say, you know, that's a fantastic cause, I'd like to give money away to that. As long as it's a genuine charity, a 501c3, they can actually have the institution that holds the funds actually give that in the form of a grant, and they've already gotten the tax deduction on that up front. So there are some great ways by working with the teams, working with the accountant, that you can really save people a lot of money in those taxes.
Yeah, and I would tell you that, you know, when you have conversations about taxes, right? Someone walks in our door, and we walk them through our 3-step meetings throughout the year, and we specifically pull up that one of our meetings is dedicated to talking about taxes. Number one, they're almost kind of blown away because they've never worked with anyone that has those conversations.
Right.
And yet we have a specific meeting dedicated to it. And so, again, that's how important we see it, right? So here's one thing that when we're talking about taxes and you have that dedicated meeting, that's one of those things that you know, we're offering to everybody that's watching is having that conversation around taxes, making sure that you're meeting with your tax preparer and your advisor. So if you're working with a current advisor and they're not having a dedicated meeting around taxes, you need to call us, right? This is your opportunity right now to call and say, hey, I'm ready to move forward and have that conversation around taxes and everything else, right? It's cash flow planning, estate planning, but taxes is a huge, expense you have throughout your lifetime. Let's make sure we're managing it properly by sitting down together, putting together a plan, along with your tax advisor if necessary, to make sure that you're paying the least amount of taxes, not only last year, but also 5, 10, 15 years in the future. So if that's you and you have not had that conversation around tax planning, or you don't have a meeting dedicated to talk about taxes every year, call us. Phone number 844-900-5210. And right after the break, we're going to talk about a couple more clients. So make sure you tune in. We'll be right back.
As a good saver, you've been putting away money during your working years. Studies find that the biggest fear of retirees is running out of money. Market volatility isn't just the downward movement of stock prices, it's the size and frequency of change. The more dramatic the ups and downs, the higher the volatility. This can put savers who are newly retired or a few years away from being retired at greater risk. Today's generation of retirees is not receiving traditional pensions as our parents or grandparents did. Instead, we have retirement accounts such as 401ks or 403bs. These accounts typically expose your money to market risk. The last thing you want right before retirement is to lose a portion of the money you need for income. But how do you turn these accounts into a retirement income? Is it safe to keep all your retirement money sitting in the stock market? The last thing you want is to lose a portion of the money you need for income due to market loss. By working with a financial professional, you can learn how to turn a portion of your savings into an income stream for life and income for the life of your spouse if you're married. We all have moments in our lives when we wish we had taken action sooner. Don't let procrastination reign on your retirement parade. Act now before it's too late. Please call our office to set up your no-cost, no-obligation retirement income review today.
All right, welcome back to the Money Puzzle. I'm Brian Ramsey. That is Chris Vaughn over there. We are partners in a firm called Family Wealth Planning Partners located right here in Louisville, Kentucky. We have two of the partners, Eric Douglas and Aaron McAndrew. So by the way, if you call during the show, our phone number 844-900-5210. Ironically enough, you get one of us to answer the phone. We don't have a call center to do it. We actually do it ourselves. So we actually have fun doing it. So if you pick up the phone right now and you call and you hear one of us, or you'll get one of us on the phone. So, all right, with that being said, we're talking taxes, right? It's so interesting enough, when we were kind of prepping for the show, I said, we were talking about this particular client, and ironically enough, I had the phone call this morning, and it was a conversation around taxes. And so what happened was, this was a business owner. Now, I will tell you, the majority of the clients we work with are just individuals that work at LG&E or UPS or Ford or GE or for a small business. And that's really the bulk of who we work with, right? However, we do work with a fair number of small business owners, and their complexity is totally different than when you work for a firm, when you work for a company, right? They just have different complexity. And so we had a conversation that they own a business here in Louisville. It's actually nationwide. They're based in Louisville, but it's a nationwide company. And they had a huge tax problem this year. So their CPA called and said, hey, look, guys, be prepared. This is coming. And so they called and said, well, what do we do? And I go, well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to get your CPA on the phone. That's the first thing we're going to do. So this morning, that's what we did. Got them on the phone and we said, okay, what can we do today to make a difference for last year? But how does that decision impact you 3, 5, 10, 15 years down the road? So all in all, as we were sort of going through some rough numbers, we had given them a particular strategy. I'm not going to go into it today. So if you want to know from a business owner, pick up the phone and call us. We'll be happy to kind of walk you through it. But what we wound up doing was we put a strategy in place, and we wound up saving them about $125,000 per year. Now some of you may say, oh my gosh, that's a huge amount of money. Right. And some of you go, oh, okay, I'm a business owner.
Relative.
Yeah, it's relative. That's a huge amount of money. Not only is it a large amount of money for right now, for this tax year, but think about, and you said this when we were actually in the airport, what if they took that money this year and it got to invest it, which is what they're going to do, right? Because of the strategy we put in place. What does that number look like 3, 5, 10 years down the road? It's a huge number, right? And it only happened because, one, they picked up the phone and called me and said, hey, we got a tax problem this year once they got their taxes completed. But number two, we got their entire team together and said, let's strategize on taxes. And that's the thing that we see all too often is folks walk in our door and they do no tax planning. And they don't have any conversation about it until after the year's over. And then they, like you said, take all the receipts they shoved into a shoebox and they go, well, let's go have a conversation. And that's just not the way you need to do it. You need to have a proactive approach to tax planning. And that's really what we offer our clients. So, all right, you've got...
One more quick story.
Yep.
We've got a guy, Michael came in. He was recently widowed. And his wife had a pension that was the bulk of their income. And she was a teacher here in Kentucky, which, if you know anything about the teachers, they basically are not eligible for Social Security. So they're living basically off of her pension. She had taken what's called a single life annuity, meaning when she passes away, it's gone. And that happened. And he's left with a very small Social Security check. He's got an IRA that was all combined from what they had saved. And then he had basically a brokerage account with some money in it. And the prevailing thought was we need to take money out of that IRA, and that's what we're going to live on. So what we did was we kind of moved things around a little bit, and we said, okay, so we've got our Social Security coming in. It's a fairly small check, but it's there. What if, and we did go over with their CPA on this, what if we take the money that is coming out of the IRA, and instead of making that income, taking that RMD and giving it away to a charity, because he is charitable. It's called a qualified charitable distribution. When we do that, what we did was that RMD is now satisfied, but he doesn't have to pay taxes on that money. And neither does, in this particular case, the church that he's given the bulk of this money to. They don't have to pay taxes on it. Now he's pulling money from a brokerage account, which is subject to capital gains taxes. But we've kept his income low enough that he pays very, very little in taxes, a little bit on the dividends, and that's it. And yet he's got about a $50,000 a year income with virtually no taxes, and that's exactly the way that the CPA and us, we designed it that way. So even if you're in a kind of a bad situation like this one was, it's only about $400,000 to work with, and that pension had gone, you can still create a good, healthy income if you can mitigate the tax situation, and that's where planning really comes in.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, we had another client. You remember Rick? Rick and his wife, Patricia, came in. This is sort of a sad story, but a very happy ending because we got to help them out. But anyway, they had come in. And one of the things that we walked through was their taxes, and we because again that's a piece of the puzzle we got to make sure we address, and so we did. And based on the amount of money that they made, it seemed like they were paying more taxes than what they should have, and that's really what they complained about was, well, we pay tax every year. We're like, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you paid a little bit, but it seems like you're paying more than what you normally would. And so what we wound up doing was we actually went through. We're like, okay, what do you give your CPA, right? Right. Show us all your documents. So we got to looking at their tax return and all the documents, and lo and behold, they were giving their CPA the wrong document. Remember, I was telling you this.
I do.
I think Aaron and I were in on this one. But anyway, they were giving the CPA the wrong document, and so long story how that all happened. We can't really understand how someone would see that document and think that was a tax document. But anyway, point being that they were a new client. We walked them through the tax planning process, and we wound up going back to the CPA and saying, hey, I think you're being given the wrong documents. And this was the meeting at the end of the year. We talked about it earlier in the show. So the CPA was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we've been making this mistake over the last couple of years. And so what we wound up doing was we went back and amended their documents. Right? We said, okay, let's go back and make some corrections. Let's get them on the right path. And so all that now came about because they picked up the phone and called us and said, I need some help, right? So what would we encourage anybody that's watching today, Chris, that has that doesn't do the tax planning?
Right.
What do we tell them to do other than pick up the phone and call?
Well, okay, pick up the phone and call obviously is the first thing, but you've got to get a team of people working for you. You've got to put a plan into this. You owe it to yourself, and there's actually government cases on this one, to pay as little in taxes as you're legally allowed to do. But that requires planning. You got to put some work into it. You got to put some thought into it. You got to get some professional advice on it. So if you think that might be you, give us a call, 844-900-5210. We'd love to talk to you and kind of help you work through that and mitigate your taxes.
All right, there it is. Have a good